facing what has happened
Yeah.
with the two NMPs becoming members, right? Party members. There's an additional consideration. I cannot help it, but every single pro-government speech from an NMP in subsequent terms,
Yeah,
I will
you
be
start
thinking. I'll be thinking, are you
Yeah.
angling?
Yeah,
Previously, you are
yeah.
angling for a second term. Now, are you angling for a party
Yeah.
position, right?
Yeah.
And let's remove all
Such a
that
good
doubts
point.
by instituting
That's
certain amendments.
That there is a desire in people, in the public, and the survey has shown that a significant percentage of the respondents want to be involved in the selection.
That's
Not
correct.
not to sit and select, but they want to know why certain people
Yeah,
have
of
been
course,
selected,
of
how many
course.
people have come in,
Of course.
and so on, and to be kept abreast of the developments in this area. And I think that I hope the government will pay attention to this, because this is an engaged society. This is how an engaged society should be.
Then the WP members did not raise a single issue on migrant workers.
No, they didn't.
Right? And I always kind of joke that actually their party name actually has workers.
Yep.
Right? So, and we understand why. I'm not actually, saying
Yeah,
this to put them down. To Walid's point, they have to look at the next election. Will this topic, this issue, cost them politically? That's one consideration, which it might, because I got the most hate comments when I talked about migrant workers,
workers, yeah.
pre-COVID. The other topic that never was mentioned by anybody, both was LGBTQ community, right? This is again before the repeal of 377A, and I understand why.
If an NMP candidate or someone applied says, no, I'm quite shy and I want to be low profile, then you shouldn't be applying. Because you are required to stand in Parliament and speak.
It's true. It's
No, but
true.
it is. If So, my dear friends, you guys are going to be on air with me for the first time in a new series, IQ series. Can you not look so stern? Okay. A new IQ series
Excited.
called
Anticipating.
What's the Buzz? Yay! And where is that from? Where is that line from?
Superstar musical.
Jesus Christ Superstar, which of course you were too young to understand.
I didn't watch.
Mm.
It was a great musical.
Yes.
So this is going to be a great musical as well.
Okay.
Right.
Good. We're
Okay,
dancing
so-
and singing with each other.
So we're going to be talking about the NMP scheme, the Nominated Member of Parliament scheme, which is a scheme introduced on the 10th of September 1990, which is exactly 35 years ago. It was introduced by then Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong,
Deputy
and
Prime
Deputy
Minister.
Prime Minister when he did this. But soon after that, he became Prime
That's
Minister.
correct.
Right, and DPM Goh Chok Tong introduced this because he wanted, and I quote, he wanted to inject independent and diverse perspectives into Parliament by introducing thinkers, people who were not encumbered by talking about municipal issues and so on, so that we could talk about national issues and not worry about electoral defeats or electoral loss or so on. So, did former PM, DPM Goh Chok Tong achieve his goal? Do you think he did in 35 years? Let's be honest about it. I will come to you later.
Sure.
Let's ask the analyst. By the way, for the viewers, in case, there are very few people who don't know who you are. But in case, the Amas and the Apes, they don't know, I will introduce. This is my dear friend, Associate Professor Walid Jumlat. Walid is supposed to be an expert in political science. We'll find out, we'll establish the veracity of that in a short while. But what's, as a political observer, as an analyst, what's your sense? Very honestly, Walid.
I don't think it has been super successful. It hasn't been a complete failure, I would say. Firstly, thanks for having me on for this debut show. I do think that there was another reason, by the way, that Goh Chok Tong said as well, because he said there are many talented people who want to contribute, but they don't want to go through the rough and tumble of electoral politics, which I think makes sense.
Makes sense.
So the intent, I think I do support the intent of the scheme. especially as countries move to a more polarized two-party systems, and two-party systems are healthy in some ways, but they may exclude people at the margins, and as they are both parties are going to the median voter, so they may exclude people at the sides, so there may be some people who are not represented. I think the NMPs can theoretically serve that function.
If they are,
If they are truly independent, I think. So there are a few things, right? One is the selection of the candidates, the NMPs. That is super crucial, and I think we need to take a look at that process. The second is, I think NMPs, probably a lot of them, I mean, the two of you know this better than me. My sense is that a lot of them don't understand the gravity, the importance, the privilege of that responsibility. And you think about successful, I mean, Antia and I had this conversation, you think about successful NMPs, right? Antia Ong, Walter Tessera, Vishwa Sadasivan, Prema Mati, maybe you can think of a few others.
Walter Woon.
Walter Woon, yes.
Claire Chung.
Yeah, possibly. I
Kanwaljit
think
Soin,
very
Kanwaljit
important,
Soin. So I
yeah.
think maybe Faiza, you can say is less than 10 probably out of 100. And most NMPs
Over
go by
100
where
now,
over people don't really know who they are as well. And then let's not even get. I mean, maybe we'll get to it later on. Whatever happened in this election has affected the credibility of the NMP scheme, I think.
We'll come to that in a
Yeah.
while, and just to add to what you're saying, there's one more dimension, which is having the gravitas to stand up and speak in Parliament unabashedly on issues that are pushing the boundaries. Not be intimidated when you stand up and speak in front of the front benchers, which very often include the Prime Minister as well. You should not be intimidated by that.
Yeah.
Because there are people, I know, NMPs, who've got the ideas. But it takes a different kind of character to be able to stand up and hold your ground.
I understand that, and I think that will happen naturally, right? We are all maybe intimidated by power, by people who are smarter than us. That's natural. But on the other hand, NMPs are not going for re-election.
No.
There's nothing to stop that stops you from saying the things that are closest to your heart. Sometimes my frustration with some NMPs is they behave like they are going for the re-election. Like, why are you so apprehensive to speak on things that you don't need to speak on things that MPs are already talking about. Right?
Yes,
If you are
yes.
going to stand up and say, I thank you to the ministers for doing this on your off day or whatever it is, then I think you don't, which has happened before.
No, and if I can be blunt, you're talking about uncutting.
yeah. So that's and I
Uncutting,
think
for people who don't understand the meaning of the word, it's like carrying
Yeah.
people, sucking
Yeah.
up to people.
so.
Yeah,
The issue is, I think, then in the selection I think the PAP also, the government needs to understand that the more independent the NMPs are perceived to be, the better it is for the PAP. And so one, it legitimizes the scheme even more, and secondly, then they can say, see, we have independent MPs. They perform better than the opposition, right? So they don't need people who are gonna uncut them all the time. You have your backbenchers for that.
In fact, if I may add, at that debate for the NMP bill,
Yep.
right, which then-DPM Goh Chok Tong tabled, you would know that there was much debate from
Of
the
course.
backbenchers,
Yes.
the PAP backbenchers.
And like the likes of Dr. Tan Cheng Bok.
Tan Cheng
who
Bok,
was against it.
Aileen Wong,
Aileen Wong.
Abdullah Tamugi. I remember Tamugi actually said that this is an indictment on them, the scheme, right? But then we also forget then MP, not a minister, then MP Shanmugam stood up to support the scheme because he said that if this good people from the society who are NMPs speak up, it will be very hard for the government to explain them away on partisan agenda.
Absolutely.
And so I'm just supporting what Walid just
Yes,
shared, right?
yes.
So it was clearly well thought out. It is still uniquely a Singaporean parliamentary innovation
It is.
for a unicameral system, right? And so, yeah, I can't agree with you more in terms of the fact that there is really not going to be much to lose if we ensure the NMPs are truly independent. are truly living to the intent of the scheme, because it can only benefit both the government, the parliamentary system.
So, for the benefit of our viewers, could you share how you think it's going to benefit the system and even the government?
Yes.
How?
So, actually, I was actually hoping that he would, as a political scientist, say why it would benefit the government. Again, it is actually saying that we are, for the government, I would imagine, and that's always been the narrative and the intent. When the bill was tabled, there was only one opposition member. In the speech that then-DPM Goh Chok Tong put out, was to say we are listening to what our citizens want. You want more alternative voices in Parliament. Since we only have, it is an election, you have voted us all in, we only have one opposition member, then it was Mr. Cham Si Tong.
Yes.
So he introduced it also as clearly a form of providing alternative voices, add value to the discourse in Parliament. Right. So if you have NMPs truly adding value to the discourse, I imagine he would not mean add value to discourse means you just parrot what I say. That wouldn't be adding value to the discourse in Parliament or alternative voices. So it's good for the government to recognize this is what the people want. This scheme is helping, to add that discourse. Your other question on why it would help the parliamentary system, we are still a supermajority parliament. And I think, as what Walid earlier said, it's taken us only last election, not the latest one, but the one before, to get us to having 12 members of the opposition party.
That's 2020.
That's 2020. We still have the same, still have 12 members, but only now 2 parties in Parliament. So I think that, again, adds to the political diversity, right? And the parliamentary diversity.
How
to our
would
system.
you respond, both of you? How would you respond to a more cynical view of the establishment of the NMP scheme in 1990? People said that this was to finish off the argument that we need the opposition to introduce alternative or contrary views. The alternative and contrary views,
That's correct.
not necessarily contrarian, but contrary views, can be introduced by a group of people called the NMPs, right? And that the whole idea was to make opposition politics in Singapore irrelevant, opposition presence irrelevant for a robust debate, for interesting ideas. Now, how would you respond to that? Is it purely cynical of point of view, or is there some substance, some truth to that? Let's hear from you first.
Oh, okay. So I think when politicians and political parties do something, it's never without self-interest in mind as well. I think we just need to be mature and accept there's always a degree of self-interest in any policy, any party position, whether it's BAP, WP, any government. So there could be that as well. But if we look empirically, that opposition representation has only increased. So that means even if that was part of the intent of the scheme, it didn't serve its purpose.
Right. That's good.
And maybe we need to see perhaps the NMPs were not seen as oppositional enough. Right? And I think just now when you said how it would benefit the government, people desire alternative voices, as we can see. Even survey after survey, elections have showed that. But if the WP suggests something in Parliament, right, that the PAP will, the first instinct is to be defensive, to respond. And even if later on it's implemented, the credit will never be given to the WP, right? That's just how partisan politics is. But if the NMP say something, the PAP can appear gracious and say, oh, okay, let's look at what you said. I give the example of you, I wrote it in my paper when you mentioned race and religion, and Lee Kuan Yew stood up, and the pledge. Right? If it was an opposition who said that, then they are politicizing race and religion. But you were never accused of that. And it was your non-partisanship that helped. When POFMA was passed, only two people, right, really opposed it. And the government went to great lengths, including Antia and Walter, went to great lengths to convince these two and to show wrote op-eds, and responded
First time,
personally,
actually.
Yeah.
He wrote it
their,
himself.
because they realized that even though it's two, it won't affect the overall vote, but the opposition of just two NMPs amongst 90 plus 100 MPs, including NMPs.
103 then, my time.
Yeah, 103. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just two, it would affect the legitimacy of the
law.
Of the law, right? So NMPs actually have a lot of sway, theoretically, if used well. Yeah.
If used well.
If used well.
If
If used
used
well.
well, and if resourced well as well, the scheme.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Your thoughts?
So, I mean, exactly very similar. That's why I was actually nodding my head. I think if we go on how far we've come in 35 years, we have enough empirical and now also, more quantitative data with the latest public survey that we did, right, for the NMP scheme that showed that there is value in the NMP scheme. But at the same time, that has not actually reduced the opposition participation. So if NMPs, if the pushback is NMPs are gonna make Singaporeans not go for opposition members, that's not been the case. Could be an indictment on the NMPs so far, sure, right? If we're saying that NMPs are not raising the opposition, the alternative voices, right, then opposition members would also not be voted in, right? So I think it's an interesting place that we're in to try to, I think this latest survey really calls to it that there is a growing appetite for a third way of representation. And so in some ways, this was quite visionary when we came up with this system 35 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Sorry, for the benefit of our viewers who may not be aware, could you give a little bit of background to the survey?
Oh yes.
Why it was
Jump straight
initiated?
into
Very,
it.
very briefly.
Sure.
When was it done in August, and why was it done, and what's your involvement in it? And very briefly,
Sure.
so they understand context.
Sure. Happy to. So it's 35 years of the scheme. We felt that it was important to commemorate.
We meaning?
Meaning a few former NMPs who came together. And I want to emphasize, right, NMPs, we are not a monolith block. So when I say a few of us, it doesn't mean every single former NMP agrees.
You're not here to represent.
No,
all the
that's
NMPs,
not my purpose here. So a few of us thought it would be nice to put together, the first ever public survey that we know on the NMP scheme. Former NMPs have come together to share our views about the scheme in the book that you were involved as well, Vishwa, in 2022, and that was also the first ever book on the NMP scheme. But this survey is really the first time we're hearing from the Singaporeans.
And it's interesting that the book was actually launched by then Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong.
So we had a foreword from then Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. It was launched in the Parliament Auditorium by then ESM.
Yes.
Goh Chok Tong.
He's still ESM.
He is still ESM. That's true. Although he always tell me he wants to retire. And also then Speaker, right?
Yes,
Tan Chun Jin was there as well. And so very grateful. So we have heard from former NMPs. We thought it's important. Because NMPs, there's so many, we all have diverse views, right? And the book really does show diverse views about this. Some NMPs say just abolish, right? Some say there's an opportunity for reform. So this survey was really for that, Vishwa. It's really for us to find a way to have us know what Singaporeans think. So the first round of the survey, which was conducted in August, we just released the findings last week. On Thursday, it's really representative, a small sample, because we used the proceeds from the book, the royalties of the book, to support this survey. To be representative, you need to obviously verify, so that there's a cost to it, right? And so the sample is representative, but it showed that.
But for me, there's an interesting point that came through in the survey. One of the findings. I believe it was about 64% of the respondents felt that NMPs were adding value.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But strangely, 1/3 of the respondents also said that they didn't quite see the relevance, or rather,
The other way around.
sorry,
So
only
only
one third,
one-third,
only
yeah,
1/3
only-
saw the relevance. Only 1/3 saw the
Only
relevance.
one in three
Now,
said very
so it's a bit
relevant or-
strange.
or highly
On one hand, you see this the NMPs as adding value. On the
Yes.
other hand, only 1/3
I
felt that it was
I
relevant.
think it's not strange. I think it's wonderful. That data point calls for, we want alternative voices that are independent, or at least perceived as independent in the sense of the scheme, which is those, actually it's not even 60, it's actually 70, who support alternative voices, who
Yeah.
saw us as supporting alternative voices in Parliament. The 1 in 3 thinking only that is relevant tells us there's something that we need to do with the scheme or this way of representation,
Yeah.
right? It's great. I think this calls for us to have a discussion, a conversation. What does that mean? Do we want to keep the scheme, abolish it? If we keep it, we can't keep it as it is today. Certainly not clearly after what Walid was also throwing out there at the end of his first, sharing what has happened this year.
So maybe this is the point in this discussion that we actually acknowledge the elephant in the room. Right? There are 2 elephants, actually. 2 elephants. So
Maybe only we think they are elephants, and maybe not.
maybe
not,
nobody,
not a lot
maybe
of other people.
others consider rats or something. But something happened. Something happened in the lead up to the general election of 2025, right? Something
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to give you the privilege of sharing what happened, because there was substantive pushback
Yeah, for
from
sure, for
from
sure.
us NMPs. Quite a few of us, myself included,
Yes, yes.
we had written about it, we had spoken about it,
Yes,
that this
yes.
should not have happened.
Yeah.
And could you summarize
Sure.
what actually happened and why was there this pushback from NMPs? You know, a letter was also written
Yes,
to the
we
Prime
did.
Minister.
That's
Right,
correct.
with a few, and I was one of the
We
signatories.
were one of the signatories. Yeah. So very quickly, on the 14th of February 2025, it's very difficult to forget that date. It was on Valentine's Day that 2 NMPs tendered their resignation to Parliament. And they haven't finished the term. And there was pushback from many, not just former NMPs, I think even experts and commentators, and actually also ordinary Singaporeans when the news reports were put out. And then, of course, we know 2 of them openly talked about joining the ruling party, the People's Action Party. But then when elections came, only one of them was fielded and has since been appointed as a political office holder.
He will take office on the 1st of October.
That's right, but he has been appointed, right? That's already been put out. So this is not about the 2 individuals per se, right? This is about what have we done with the scheme.
Yeah.
When a scheme that is to be partisan, independent, has non-partisan, has been in my books, and I wrote a very strong commentary in Rise that in some ways has really completely collapsed. That part of the scheme, the non-partisanship,
And
the independence part of it, right? And it wouldn't matter to me whether they join PAP or WP. Either way, right? And so you hear a lot of pushback to, did not even finish the term, and one of them also was on his 2nd term, right? It wasn't his 1st term. And to the pushback when I was giving my views of, but they quit, they are allowed. I understand that legally there's no question asked, it's legal.
At least it was silent. The Constitution is silent on it.
Silent on that,
Yeah.
but we also know that it's never the letter of the law, but also the spirit, of the scheme that's important. In this case, we also know what's the process to join any political party, especially the 2 main ones. It's not going to happen on the 13th of February that you got asked,
Yeah.
and then on the 14th that you then tender
Right.
to maintain your non-partisanship. right? So those are the parts that I think are very problematic. And it does a lot of harm to the scheme. It erodes a lot of trust. And, yes. Right. And also it erodes a lot of trust and credibility to the scheme. It's not as if the scheme is so solid to start with when it's already, we talked about it, right? There's already so much of pushback by the opposition. You're putting it there to have more establishment folks. Then the ruling party say, no, these are opposition voices, right?
Sorry, Anthea, if I could just ask you a question.
Sure.
The survey.
Yes.
A significant percentage of the respondents actually said they don't have a problem.
Yes.
They don't have a problem with people quitting, stepping down before the term is up, as long as there is a cooling off period. Right?
That's exactly.
And then I think 74% of the respondents, much higher, they said that they won't have a problem, especially if they stand for election as an independent.
That's exactly right.
Not joining a party.
That's exactly right.
But they didn't. The public sentiment seems to suggest that they didn't really have a peeve with people quitting NMP position to go into politics as long as there's a cooling off period. So I think this is a qualifier. I don't think the issue is so much that you should never in your life go into party politics. It's just that there must be some form of separation during that term, right?
That's exactly
now, as a political observer, as a political scientist, and
can I just add on also
yes,
that?
Please.
So therefore, just to finish off what you also shared and to be very open about it. So a few of us, former NMPs, 16 to be exact, also then wrote a letter to the Prime Minister, as you alluded. So I don't want it to just be sort of, pushed aside. To request for a review of the scheme. Right, which actually exactly that, right? Included suggested strategies like a cooling off period. We did not say, it must be how long.
Yes.
But a cooling off period to ensure that there's this clear independence while they are in term. Right, it cannot be an overnight thing, because an overnight thing just shows that the time you were still in term, until you quit to join a political party immediately, you were not necessarily non-partisan. So the cooling off period, so I think former NMPs are not saying don't join. So this is not as if we former NMPs are saying, hey, don't join at all. Not at all.
No.
Right? I think it's important to clarify that. We also, of course, suggested in that letter also to say maybe review also the selection process to bring more credibility back to the scheme. So perhaps right now, it is actually the selection process, the final selection process is with the Parliamentary Special Select Committee. And that obviously is a composition of the makeup of the parliament. So my time, there was one opposition MP member on the panel.
Which is always the case.
Yes, exactly. Which, so we suggested perhaps to look into another body like the elected presidency or any sort of arm's length, instead of going with the parliamentary makeup. Because unlike before, when NMPs were an act of parliament, in other words, parliament will decide if there will be NMPs for that term. I think it was since 2010, the NMP scheme has been enshrined in the constitution. So it's now a constitutional system within the parliament. So it's not a parliamentary, mechanism.
I don't want us to go too deep into some of these things. In the interest of time and also for clarity.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So what's your analysis, based on whatever has been shared so far, what's your analysis about, not so much the survey findings, but do you feel that this has really affected the standing and credibility of the NMP scheme as an institution, and now as part of the Constitution?
Yeah.
Or are we overreacting?
I mean, it's very boring because we agree on this. So 100% agree with what Anthea said. I think, in fact, I would say that I'll go one step further, that if nothing is changed, I fear that the NMP scheme has been damaged beyond repair. So something needs to give now. I think the constitutional amendment needs to come in this parliamentary term and say, hopefully, it's by one of the NMPs that come in and say, okay, let's discuss this, right?
And
let's
private member
and say that
bill.
to save the credibility of this scheme, let's have that cooling off period. Right?
Yeah.
I would have said before this, I didn't even think it was possible that the government would approach NMPs because just they wouldn't destroy the legitimacy of something they wanted to protect so much. But so I would have said that previously, before 2025, I would say, yeah, anybody who becomes an NMP should just think that you should never join partisan politics. But that door has been opened now. So we can't close it back. The only thing we can do is have the cooling off period, I think. I think that would be fair. And the second one, the selection of the... so there are two parts to the selection. One is the institutional part.
Sorry,
completely.
just before you go
Please,
to selection.
Please.
So you don't think there is a problem for an NMP to actually cooling off period
No, I
aside?
think it's a problem. I think NMPs, if they want to become NMPs, they should think that partisan politics is not for them, out for them. But
Otherwise,
that
join
has-
a political party
exactly,
if you want a political
exactly,
career.
right?
Yeah.
So now, by the way, this is a bit awkward for me because both of them are my friends.
Yeah.
Harun is my good friend. And in fact, I value him so much as a person, right? That if Harun was up against me in an election, I would vote for Harun over me, right? So this is nothing against the two
Yeah.
of them. This is about the credibility of the scheme.
No, this qualifier is very important.
Yes.
Yeah, so
It's
as in-
nothing personal.
It's
No,
not at all. Not at
Not at
all.
all.
And I wish Harun well, and I hope he becomes a minister, right? But now that is about the NMP scheme, right? And that has happened. So we need to do something to it. And I think the do something, first of all, institute the cooling off period, that amendment. Second of all, the selection, there are two parts to it. I completely agree with Antia. Let it be under the elected president. Let the elected president choose, or at least have a different version of different idea. Singapore is good at reimagination
instead
of the select committee.
committee.
Yes.
Okay, what's the logic behind that?
Okay, so the
Non-partisan.
elected president is non-partisan, right? The select committee, it has one opposition MPs and one opposition MP, the rest are PAP MPs, right? So by definition, they are partisan.
Yeah.
You cannot tell me the select committee is not partisan.
course.
I'm not saying they don't have integrity. I am just saying a fact that it's partisan and it will be perceived as partisan, right? The second one is, so the first one about process, right? You can change it to presidency. And second thing, you need more transparency. We don't know who applied for the NMPs, how they were chosen.
What's the
And
criteria?
What's the criteria, right? If the list is revealed to the public. I remember this has been discussed a few times, and then
Yeah.
one of the reasoning given is that, then it will deter people. If your name being public will deter, then you
Then you
shouldn't.
should not be.
You should even put yourself.
You don't put yourself for a
Unless
public
you
role.
say, I will accept the NMP ship on condition
Yeah.
that
Oh,
my
no, no,
photo,
no.
my the video
Yeah,
of
yeah,
me must be in silhouette.
Yeah. So that's the first part, right?
And don't show my voice. Don't
Yeah.
actually play my real
Yeah.
voice.
So the institutional part needs to be settled. But the second one, even if that doesn't change, because that's some heavy lifting, I think the select committee, if it's still under the select committee for the next round, what they can do is go out of their way to choose people who are perceived to be more independent. Go out of your way to choose people who, the Antias, the Walters, right? Not the list of people who are just going to agree and who haven't shown a streak of independence. The functional groups, right? I think it's also a bad way to choose NMPs.
Yeah, I was going to come to that.
Yeah,
yes,
right?
me,
Okay,
me
yeah.
too.
Now,
I was going to
now
add on.
this subject matter has come up. I mean, currently there are 7.
Yeah.
Right, 7 broad categories, which includes
6, I think.
6 or 7,
Yeah, 6.
but which also includes the arts, media, and so on as one
Yeah.
subcategory.
Correct.
Right, business organizations, tertiary
Labour.
institutions, and labor union, and so on. And so you feel that representation from these national institutions and so on, or clusters, is not useful.
I think not all of them are useful.
Okay.
You don't need labor
Okay.
because you already have NTUC MPs.
Okay.
Business, basically, we are the most ultra-capitalist country in the world. We don't need representation from business from the NMPs when most of our MPs are going to do that already. All of those are inbuilt in their positions as MPs, right? So we don't need that. Now, actually, the arts, I think, is useful because there is no natural constituency.
Because you also need
for
a
arts.
platform.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would
Platform.
say even the tertiary institutions, even though it would benefit somebody like me, right? Is it really necessary when you have a Ministry of Education? And, we can think of all of that. But there is another important point, which is the NMPs who go through that, they are not obliged or obligated to only raise issues from that. My worry is when they feel that they are raised by this, then I think we had this conversation with one former NMP, and one advice which she got before when she was serving from a senior was stay in your lane, which was terrible advice. If stay in your lane, then you only talk about the sector that you are going to talk about. When
And the
actually,
lane itself is very narrow.
exactly,
In
when
this
actually
case,
your lane,
even narrower.
Yeah.
In this case, very, very narrow.
your lane as an NMP is actually all national issues because
That's
you
right.
get to discuss everything. You are not
correct.
limited by that.
In fact, if I may add, and please come in on this,
Sure.
right? NMPs, the more effective NMPs, in my view, were those who talked about things that several elected members wouldn't even think
100%.
about,
Yes.
wouldn't talk about,
100%.
because they've got lanes.
100%.
That's
The
right.
elected MPs have got lanes, especially if you're political office holders.
Yeah.
And you can see that many of them stick to those lanes, economic, political, social, and so on. And also, it's a platform for members to talk about their
No,
constituencies.
actually, I would disagree with you on the elected MPs. They have the lanes, but it's not that, right? Their lane, like yesterday, Minister Ong Ye Kung was talking about WPs. I thought that nothing to do with the health minister.
Yeah.
So
You're right, you're right.
But their lane, they do have a lane. Their lane is the next election.
Yeah.
Yes.
They are concerned about it, and NMPs are not, and that's
Yes.
their strength that should be harnessed.
And I must add also that includes the opposition
100%.
MPs, because so NMPs and speaking from my own lived experience, right? That 2 years I was in Parliament. This was pre-COVID, Vishwa.
Yeah.
Even the WP members did not raise a single issue on migrant workers.
No, they didn't.
Right? And I always kind of joke that actually their party name actually has workers.
Yep.
Right? So, and we understand why. I'm not actually, saying this to put them down. To Walid's point, they have to look at the next election. Will this topic, this issue, cost them politically? That's one consideration, which it might, because I got the most hate comments when I talked about migrant workers,
yeah.
pre-COVID. The other topic that never was mentioned by anybody, both was LGBTQ community, right? Same, this is again before the repeal of 377A. And I understand why. So that's actually, I think that's the thing to understand. We are a majoritarian democracy, first past the post. Even opposition members have to look into what are the politically effective issues.
And what are the political risks of
Correct.
taking up
There's a real
certain
cost.
issues?
That's correct.
Right? Whereas NMPs are not
I don't
overly
need
bothered.
votes.
Yep.
I get some
but
comments, but I don't need
there
votes,
is-
so it's okay.
There is one consideration that may restrict an NMP
Yeah.
from speaking up vehemently, which is if he or she is seriously considering a second term.
Yes.
And I'm saying this because I have actually spoken to NMPs who actually told me that I should be less vehement in my speeches if I'm considering a second term, which I should, in his opinion. And I told him quite clearly, I have got no interest in a second term. I would like to therefore fire off all my rounds in my first term.
I am completely
But
with you.
it is an issue because I've observed that if you have political intentions and ambitions,
Yeah.
right, non-partisan albeit, in having a second term, or even if it's not second term, being appointed chair of certain
Certain committees.
national
Yeah.
committees and
Yep, yep.
organizations.
Co-optation,
And
yeah.
you see, so there is, it's not altogether without calculations.
Yep.
Yeah, of
It
100%.
depends on the individual, but it goes back to your point, and yours too. How do you ensure that whoever comes in is not really bought into these considerations?
Yeah, it's never gonna be a foolproof.
Never.
Right? It's
It can't.
never because ultimately, and that always reminds me, it depends on the intention
Yeah.
of the individual, what they wish to achieve. Right? But I think now there's another based on what has happened with the two NMPs becoming members, right, party members. There's an additional consideration. I cannot help it, but every single pro-government speech from an NMP in subsequent terms,
gonna
Yeah,
I will
you'll
be
start
thinking.
wondering.
I'll be thinking, are you
Yeah.
angling?
Yeah,
Previously,
yeah.
you're angling for a second term. Now, are you angling for a party
Yeah.
position, right?
Yeah.
And let's remove all
Such a
that
good
doubts
point.
by instituting
That's
certain amendments, right,
That's
to the
correct.
scheme to
Yes.
save the credibility.
So well put.
So
And
yeah, please.
No, and I can't agree with you more, Vishwa, because it was the same thing, right? I didn't think of a second term. So, you fire. Well, I mean, it wasn't even a firing rounds. I wasn't even thinking of a second term, but these were the things that I had to do, right? This was the issue. These were the communities that needed their voices, and I happened to, be able to do that. But I was asked by so many to go for a second term, and obviously, as you know, that did not come through.
Yeah.
But I just want to touch on what you shared about, there's this other cost that maybe we don't talk about, which is very astute of you to raise this.
Yeah.
Is when you are also, wanting to be part of national committees and
Yeah.
national projects. And that's true. I personally see a difference, and I'm not saying that it's causative, right, at all. I was actually invited to more than a few national committees, but after there was definitely a difference, except for the workplace safety and health committee. That one I continue to stay on it, right? Yeah. So I just wanted to share a little bit of lived experience from what you said, so that your viewers and listeners know this is
Yeah.
not just conjectures, right?
It's not.
There's
And
also
I
a
can-
lived experience that I've gone through.
And it goes back to the points you raised about what you look out for in the selection process. Okay, I don't think we are being sour grapes or anything of that sort. Seriously, at the end of the day, there is this word that keeps coming or has kept coming to my mind, especially when I was an NMP, about being beholden. It's very hard to detect it, and it's a moving target. You can be beholden to a party. You can be beholden to individuals in that party. Therefore, you seek alignment with goals, with the input. Or you could be beholden to a system.
Yep.
But being beholden is a very dangerous thing when you want to, when the reason for introducing this scheme is to have alternative viewpoints, contrary viewpoints, articulated with integrity and courage. Now, these are very difficult things to measure.
Yep.
Or
Right.
to even be able to know from interviews.
Yeah.
No,
Right?
and
Or the statement of purpose as part
and
of the
there is
application
one other
process.
dimension.
Yeah.
You may start your term as an NMP
Yeah, exactly.
without being
Independent.
beholden,
Yeah.
but in the process, because of your close interactions in the members' room, for example, with
The tea room,
you
yeah.
without you realizing, you could be cultivated.
Yeah, I think every person I know I am conscious of this increasingly also, now that
Yep.
I have
A platform.
I won't say a huge platform, but and I do get MPs across the aisle, meet up with me, and I'm starting to wonder whether I should, because my policy is whoever wants to meet up with me, I meet up. Because I can also sense, and I have to be really conscious about
That's
this. I can sense the more you know somebody, the softer you. It's just a natural thing.
Natural.
It's
Very
not
human.
even.
Natural.
It's
It's
not
very
even
human. It's also
beholden.
psychology.
This is So this is just I'm a bit softer. I will interpret this in a kinder way, right? If interpret your actions in a kinder way. So
Yeah.
NMPs also especially need to be so conscious of this, because you're interacting with people all the time, and then you're thinking, should I stand up or not? Okay, I'll give it a kinder interpretation. But NMPs must always resist that temptation, right? Because I think firstly, we also need to reach a level of maturity where we can disagree vehemently and be friends.
Yeah.
Right, that doesn't affect our friendship. But secondly, your calling is higher than your relationship with that person. Your calling as an NMP, right? It's such a privilege, you get to affect laws, or you get to affect
And
policy.
there are only 9 seats.
Yeah, 9 seats only. It affects like millions of people, right?
And-
that
and-
should
and
be
you
the
can leave a
understanding.
mark.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can
yeah,
leave a
absolutely.
mark.
But can I also add that it's also not for NMPs to oppose for opposition's
Of course,
sake.
of course.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not, and I also want to just make sure we put it out there. When we say independent and non-partisan, we're not saying anti, PAP or anti-government, right? This is actually, to say that this is really truly a third way of representing, where it's not along partisan lines, because the opposition parties also have their party lines. Right? It's actually to be truly independent. So it's also important for NMPs not to be seen as, not to actually come to this system thinking it's their role to oppose whatever is actually being put up by the government as well. Because
So
that's not the role either. That's the opposition role.
We're coming to the end of the discussion, but I just want to quickly summarize some of the points that have jumped at me. Number one, we are not saying that we are against NMPs ever going the partisan way. What we are saying in general is try and avoid that, but more importantly, put guardrails. And one of those guardrails is a well-specified cooling off period, okay, which must be determined and articulated, and it's non-negotiable. Okay, that's number one. Secondly, I think it's very clear that all three of us and several other NMPs as well would agree that there is a desire in people, in the public, and the survey has shown that a significant percentage of the respondents want to be involved in the selection. Not to sit and select, but they want to know why certain people have been selected, how many people have come in, and so on, and to be kept abreast of the developments in this area. And I think that I hope the government will pay attention to this, because this is an engaged society. This is how an engaged society should be, right?
And certainly part of the We First
absolutely,
society.
certainly part of the, very well put. Now, that's where, if you ask me, it gets a little complicated, right? Because you can put down the criteria. These are the things we look out for categorically. But if you ask me, the more I think about it, the issue is a lot more amorphous, right? Integrity. How do you actually look at a person and say this person has integrity, when actually those qualities are even more important than what is quantifiable? And we also know that a person may start off having that level of integrity, but over time, for the reasons we all talked about, you can be cultivated even without knowing. And the truth of the matter is, there's no society in the world where cultivation doesn't happen. At all levels, it happens. So let's also not be naive about it, because you must expect that there would be this cultivation, and you could end up being beholden even without realizing it.
So NMPs have to realize that parties will want to do that to NMPs.
And especially,
that should be the default
and especially
position.
if you're worthy. They'd want
So
you on their side.
They should think, they shouldn't come in, as the word you used was naive. And you said, yes, it's true. There are some things that we cannot measure, right? Integrity and all of that. But there are some things that we can do. So we do the things that we can. Let's say there are 50, I think the last round, was it 50 plus, 60 plus? So you release the names, and then the public can see, oh, if this person, the public thinks is more worthy, didn't get, but this person got, then that would affect the decision making of the select committee as well. They would think, okay, now I have to be even more reliable. I have to be more strict in how I choose, because the public will know who these people are chosen as opposed to the ones who are not chosen.
And I would add one more dimension, which may sound mischievous to the audience or the powers that be. I think in the social media world, right, maybe each one of them have to put out a statement of intent, and say, this is what I stand for.
Which we do in the process.
No, but
in
it's
the
private.
application process.
I'm saying put it out to the
No,
public.
that's what I mean. We already do in the application process.
And
you could
I
actually
think in the spirit of transparency.
So I was sharing, also in the chat with Walid, and also in the chapter in the book, right? I also said that some mandate is better than no mandate, right? If the citizens are asking to be involved in the NMP process, we already have certain things like the Singaporean of the Year,
Yeah.
where there's nominations and all. And this is not a popularity contest.
No,
We know it's
no.
about the ideals of Singapore that we want to find the Singaporean of the Year, the finalists. I'm not saying that that's where we find our NMPs. I'm saying there's already certain processes like this where we involve the country in choosing who they want to represent them. In Singaporean of the Year, of course, the Singaporean ideals, right, is what we're choosing for. So there's certain things like that, right? We have districts and mayors and all that. There might be district elections that we could do. I don't know, right?
Although personally, if you ask me, I don't think we should go the election way.
No. I mean, you know what I mean by the
Yeah.
election is actually the sort of the social media.
Yeah.
Get a sense of, what getting that participation from the citizens, knowing that they're part of it. So that's all one part. The other part is. Right now, the way the select committee releases the minutes of the interviews done with the final candidates is literally just who was in the committee,
Yeah.
Yeah.
what is it for, when did it end, when the meeting end, right? Maybe it will be helpful also for some of the deliberation. I mean, of course, keeping certain things that might
Yeah,
be
the security stuff you can reveal, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
So
But some
yeah.
manner of their thinking collectively
Yep.
or the consensus that they reach as a committee, why the 9
Absolutely.
final candidates are
Absolutely.
going to be, really
And it
represented.
leaves
Such a great idea.
less room for speculation
yes.
and wondering, is this person part of the
Yes.
collective and
Correct.
system?
Yes.
Is there favoritism? Is there nepotism?
Yes.
And all those questions will
Yes.
come. Now,
so sorry,
yeah.
I just wanted to say that maybe even if the institutions don't change, the NMP candidates can declare themselves.
Yeah.
I have put this up, So imagine if all 65 people actually put it up, I have applied for this. I think people who apply for NMPs, the NMP position, should be people who are willing to do this to begin with.
Yes, and if an NMP candidate or someone applied says, no, I'm quite shy and I want to be low profile, then you shouldn't be applying. Because you are required to stand in Parliament
Don't let
and
that laugh.
speak.
It's true. It's
No,
true.
but
Yes.
if
It's not a low profile position.
If you say no, I have a lot of opinion, but I don't want to talk about it. Then why are you putting your name up to be an NMP?
Then it also speaks to the expectations that need to be laid out very clearly.
Yeah.
That this is not just a position because to be fair, Viswa, you know this. The criteria says, you distinguished member
service
of
to Singapore.
society,
Yeah.
some honor that you have brought. Because I remember this because in the application I said, I don't know whether I brought honor
Yeah,
to
what
the country.
honor did he bring to us?
But I know I've not
I put
dishonored
my
my
head
country
down.
was what I said because I didn't know how to respond to that question about
it's
bring
very-
honor.
I mean, I would like to believe that it's just to approximate a certain value system.
Sure. Sure.
And
But we must be mindful not to make it too
Yeah.
much to the elites,
Yep,
because
yep.
if we say
Yep.
honor, because I genuinely felt it just meant that I have to win a lot of National Day awards already, or I've gone out there.
Personally, I don't think that was the intention. But I'd really like to ask one very important question for me.
Yes.
Right? Now, has the NMP scheme in its current form come to the end of the road? In its current form, come to the end of the road. Is it possible for us to evolve the NMP scheme, maybe to constitute an upper house, to form some form of an upper house in bicameral system, where you have, like in many societies, you have the House of Commons in Britain, House of Commons, and the House of Lords.
That's right.
You have the House
And the senators
and the
others.
Senate
Yep.
in the US. And in many societies that have evolved, because you need to have evolved to have a critical mass of people who are qualified to be in the upper house, which is more advisory and less looking at the operational aspects of ruling the country. Have we come to the end of the road, that NMP scheme? And there are two options at the fork. One is say, bye-bye, thank you, It's good. It was good while it lasted. We don't need to proceed. Put it aside. Or do we say, let's maybe study what else it can become?
Yeah, I think just to answer the one quickly on the upper house, I'm not a fan of the upper house because that one does lead to nepotism and connections and so on. Elitism. That's how it is in Malaysia, in UK as well. And then there's a way for the ruling party to, people who lose the election, they become in the upper house, then they can become ministers. So all of those,
It happens a lot even
worse when there were
in
life
India.
terms.
Correct.
Worse
Yes,
when there were life
terms.
In India as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I'm not a fan. Has it come to the end of the road? I think it depends on the selection of the NMPs. If nothing changes, but nothing constitutionally changes, but the 9 NMPs chosen are closer to Anthea than some of the other NMPs, I think it will breathe a new lease of life into the scheme. But my preference is for us to mandate this constitutionally, to change it in order to overcome all the doubts that have been raised by whatever happened in this election.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anthea.
Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Certainly, in its current form, it cannot continue.
When you say current form?
Meaning, without any changes made to the cooling off period, we can't pretend what has happened has not happened.
Yep.
And then go on and call for the next batch of NMPs, which has to be called by March 2026, as it is, right? If that's going to be the case, then I'd rather we not actually have NMP scheme. If we want to keep it, then we need to bring in some of these strategies we just talked about to evolve it. I see a lot of merit. Again, like you, not a fan of the upper house. I do think, and this survey clearly points to, Singaporeans wanting the third way of representation. And we already have an institutionalized independent system built in to our constitution. That's number one. Number two, this growing appetite for independence also was very clearly shown with the recent election with the 2 independent candidates doing so well. So that's another sign. And partly, we can all speculate why, but maybe the partisan battles and the to and fro is just, we're all fatigued by the partisan battles and just get down and we just want to be represented properly, right? Number 3, so much gridlock and polarization with clearly 2-party systems of majoritarian democracies. I, as a Singaporean who love my country very much, would not want to see us go down that path, right, of having 2-party system. We're not there yet, as we often say, we're 1.5, because our opposition party did not say they want to be a government. But I think the NMP scheme gives us the opportunity to create this independent bloc.
Right.
Even in government, we have 3 branches. Why can't in parliament we also have 3 branches to block against what we are seeing before our eyes? Partisan ills that don't just stay within the chamber. It actually breaks society. And I don't think we should really take this opportunity to be serious about the review, the changes that we want to see in the NMP scheme. I cannot agree more with Walid. It does come down to the individual that can be guardrails. So I would say choose someone like Walid or Jeremy, who has actually openly said he's the independent candidate. He's openly said he would like to also put himself up for the NMP call. Then it would show that, yes, we are truly choosing, independent candidates. There's no foolproof method to choose, as you said, right?
Yeah.
But let's
so
not throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Just in one sentence, what is the message, if you have the opportunity, what's the message you'd like to convey to Prime Minister Lawrence Wong on this matter? One sentence.
The scheme's credibility has been hurt tremendously.
Hurt or heard?
H-U-R-T. It has been almost destroyed. So the Prime Minister and his cabinet has to do something drastic, I think, to restore the credibility.
Thank you.
Well, I have shared with him, as you know, together with all our collective voices, urgently imploring him to review the system along the 2 parts we talked about. One is the cooling off. as well as the selection process to review. We're not saying that what we suggested are the only strategies and only solutions. And then the third, for me personally, as I've just articulated, right, we have such a credible opportunity of seeing what's going on with the more mature democracies around us. Let's really look at what we have created 35 years ago and actually make the most out of it as we move forward to be a we first society.
It's a very long one sentence.
I know.
But thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for indulging me.
and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having us.
I'm hopeful that this discussion such as this on multiple platforms is precisely what captures the spirit of the NMP scheme. To have 1,000 flowers bloom. And these flowers must be of different complexions. On that note, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vishwa. Thank you.